Welcome to this edition of Gigs and Guitars. In this episode we are going to take a look at the Aynsley Lister Blues Tour, which took place in December of this year. In fact, it was the 1st of December at the Waterloo Music Bar at Blackpool, which I went to, so stay tuned for that. Now, I came across Aynsley Lister on various sort of YouTube channels, never seen him before, really not aware of his back catalogue of music. And I thought on these various sort of YouTube programmes, for example, That Pedal Show being one of those, I thought I'm going to have to check him out. So I realised from his tour dates he was going to be playing my local music venue in Blackpool. And I thought, do you know what, we'll get tickets, Michelle and we would tag along and go and watch Aynsley Lister. Now, from what I have seen on YouTube, brilliant guitarist, nice fella when he's been speaking to Mick and Dan on That Pedal Show. So not knowing his back catalogue and not really sort of being too familiar with his work, but I do like great guitar music, particularly blues. That's my sort of background really. And I've always said if you can play great blues guitar, you can almost play anything really, to be fair. So we've just walked into the Waterloo Music Bar and all I could hear was really this great guitar tone, but I couldn't really see from where I was exactly what was playing. We were right at the back, tucked around the corner because the place was full. It was full. And the interesting bit was this slide guitar tone that sounded very full, it sounded very rich, and as I sort of peered around the corner, I could see it was some kind of hollow body sort of guitar of like a semi-acoustic type of thing. And I did not have a clear view at all. Now, what I do recall at that point was that this guitar was featured on That Pedal Show a month or two ago, where Mick Taylor was interviewing Aynsley Lister about his album, his forthcoming gigs, his pedal boards, amplifiers, which is the important part of that show. But they spent a bit of time sort of looking at this guitar, which had been bought for 50 quid in a junk shop some time ago with just one string on it. And there's some suggestion that it might have been a Framus or an Eggman guitar. Now, they decided that they were sort of erring towards the Framus. I've done a little bit of research today, and don't hold me to this, but I'm going to hedge my bets towards an Eggman, to be honest. And the only reason why is that the Framus guitars that I've seen today online, from about that period of decades ago, in the arch top sort of hollow-bodied kind of guitars, they had more elaborate inlays on the fretboard and so on and so forth, whereas the Eggmans were a bit more basic from what I've seen. And I'm going to hedge my bets. I'm going to go that way for an Eggman, to be honest. But again, I've only basically touched the tip of the iceberg. I could be completely wrong, so don't hold me to that. But if you do know, drop us a quick line below in the comment section. Anyway, but whether it's a Framus or an Eggman, it sounded absolutely fantastic. It really did. Some lovely, lovely slide guitar. And yeah, the tone was just incredible. It really, really was. One of the standout tracks for me in set one was a track called Eve Part 1. And Aynsley mentioned it was a cross between James Bond and, what did he say? Pink Floyd. I have to say, what an interesting kind of song that was. And it's got a little bit of a James Bondy kind of flair to it. I'm not really sure about the Pink Floydy bit, but certainly a bit of James Bond there with its arrangement and the way it's presented. And he did say that, interestingly, he was inspired to write that song by Killing Eve, which is a drama documentary on the BBC, which you can catch up on iPlayer. You go and watch a blues band, you expect blues guitar, bass sort of guitar work all the way through the night. This was a complete sort of abstract. The arrangement was nice. It was a lovely, lovely, eerie, haunting kind of ballad. But key phrases within it is, she's already on to you. And it's a little bit sort of unnerving, really. So when Aynsley Lister's doing the actual gig, he's got a three-piece lineup, which is obviously him doing the guitars and vocals. You've got Craig Bacon on drums, and you've got John O'Martin playing bass. So they're obviously going out as a trio, a three-piece band. But when you're trying to deliver a song from your latest album, which has got layers of other instruments mixed into it, you know, for example, in the track called Eve, you've got some really nice melodic piano, which you can't replicate on stage. But I thought they did it very, very well between the three of them. And I thought that the arrangement really covered the fact that they weren't able to actually produce piano on stage that night, which I thought was really, really good. They're able to get around it as a three-piece band very, very effectively and deliver that song very, very well. The second set was about to start. Most people in the main sort of, in the stage area, sort of go to the bar and get drinks. And I said to Michelle, I said, look, should we try and get down to the front a little bit, sort of nearer? And we're able to get right to the front. And what I'd like to try and do is, the first set we heard it from the main PA, so we got the main mix coming out of the big speakers at the front. And I thought the sound was very good. But what I like to try and do is get right to the front. So I'm inside the main sort of PA speakers, so I can hear the acoustic content of the drums, the bass from the back line, and more importantly, the guitar work from the back line again from Aynsley Lister. And so we're stood right in the middle of the front, and I thought, we're in a good spot here, and equally because Michelle could actually see something. She's only like 4'11", and if that, I think, it's going to kill me for that. It allowed her to see, because she does struggle at these gigs with much taller people generally stood in front of her. Anyway, so we're at the front, and I was able to hear the bass, the drums, and Aynsley's rig in full action. Now, he did have on his 2 amps baffles fitted, which sort of like are at a 45-degree angle. So if the amp's facing that way, it's got a deflector about a 45-degree angle, which deflects the brunt of the noise. Or the sound, if you will, sort of above your head, so it wasn't too harsh. What would I say about the gig itself? Again, I'm not too familiar with Aynsley Lister's content. Is a new artist for me to watch. It was very, very good. And the key points for me is very, very simply this. It was great guitar tone, great guitar work from a blues, I don't know, master, if you will. And I was just stood there thinking, wow, this sounds great. He's playing away. Now, but one of the best things that I did see was good interaction from Aynsley with Craig Bacon and Jono. And you could see that they're enjoying the gig. They wanted to be there. It wasn't like, oh yeah, it's another day at work kind of thing. They're actually enjoying the set, and there's a little bit of banter as they're progressing through songs between them. They're all looking at each other, and there's a bit of a vibe going on. And I like to see that. Sometimes you can go and watch bands and the guitarist is playing away, might be daydream a bit. They're obviously going to be concentrating, but for me, they've got to look like they're actually enjoying what they're doing. And I could see that from Aynsley Lister. And it's good that he and his other band members engaged together to make it work brilliantly. And that made me feel like I was enjoying it more at the front, which I was enjoying it anyway. You felt part of it, and that is exactly what it was all about. You felt involved, it felt more personal, and that for me is what gigs are all about. So when I was looking around the stage at what instruments Aynsley's using that night, I was sort of expecting some 1970s Stratocasters because that's what he likes. And in fact, I did have a brief conversation with Aynsley around about May this year on Instagram, who was selling a cherry red 1970s Stratocaster, which I was fairly interested in until we discussed the price. And I thought, right, I can't afford that, so I ended up buying a custom shop instead. Anyway, that's another story. So so moving on. So there was no 70s Stratocasters there that I could see. All I could see was the guitar that we just mentioned earlier. But what I did see was a single cut guitar made by Probet, which is Damien Probet guitars, if you will, and two of his very fine S-style guitars in the Stratocaster style. And to be honest, each one of those three guitars sounded absolutely fantastic. They really did. They looked great and they sounded very, very good too. And to be honest, I think when you're actually a touring musician, you've got several things to think about. If you're playing various venues, there's two things that come to mind. Are your guitars vulnerable to theft? And also, if you're bringing vintage guitars out, there's going to be an insurance implication. And also, in terms of would you want to put vintage guitars through the work mill, if you will, of every single night where you are playing them, you are using them? And would it be far better bringing other guitars out with you that can do just the same job with a very similar guitar tone, but are less vulnerable to either damage or to theft and things? Anyway, so I think that's why he's brought the Probet guitars, because he's obviously endorsed in some kind of way by Damien Probet. They sounded great, they look good. Yeah, and why not? I've often thought that about my guitars when I go out playing gigs. How vulnerable are they? And you've got to try and reduce the risk in some kind of way, and how you do that is really down to you. Did I enjoy the Aynsley Lister gig? Well, yes, I did. And the other good thing was it inspired me to go and buy his CD, which is called Along for the Ride. So I popped around the back, met Aynsley Lister. We did the mandatory gigs and guitars selfie, and he signed the actual CD cover. And it did inspire me to go and buy the CD. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But would I go and see Aynsley Lister again? And to be honest, the very simple answer is yes. The sound was great, the performance was spot on. Aynsley Lister singing, which I've not mentioned at the minute, you can hear the dictation in Aynsley Lister's voice very, very clearly. All too often I go to gigs and you can watch a fantastic artist or performer, but you haven't got a clue what they're singing about, or certainly I don't. And sometimes they're not singing clearly enough for me to pick out the vocals or the lyrics, if you will. But Aynsley Lister's dictation during his singing is absolutely brilliant. You can hear every word coming out of his mouth. And for me, when they're actually writing these songs and basically putting songs together, it's all about storytelling. And you've got to get that story across. And Aynsley Lister does that very well. In relation to the actual overall performance, I would put it alongside Joe Bonamassa. I've been to see him. Very similar vocal styles, but equally the guitar work for me. In fact, I'm going to say this now. Out of the two, I would put Aynsley Lister slightly above Joe Bonamassa. But let's keep that between you and I. Don't tell Joe. I met Aynsley Lister. We had a selfie photograph done. I bought a CD on the back of this great show. He signed the CD, and I've got to say, that CD, I must have listened to it now probably around about 20 times. It's been on in the car non-stop. I've had it on downstairs coming out of my Bauer & Wilkins speakers. I've had it on here in my studio. I've been listening to it in the bath. And it's a great album. Now, what I have done is I've made some notes about various tracks on the album. Bide My Time is track number 2. It's got a really nice bridge within the song. And I like bridges within songs because it gives you a little bit of space within the song, a little bit of a distraction. You think, where's this taking us now on this journey through the track? And it's got a nice little hook within the song, which is Spend My Time With You, and then it changes a bit again. And that, it just keeps sort of ringing in my head really, and I quite like that. And when you've got a little bit of a hook that you take away from a track and you're still humming away, and that's what I took from track number 2, Bide My Time, and it's a really nice track. Again, another one, track 4, Is This Really Happening Now? Great guitar solo in that track. Lovely single coil tones from I Could Hear, and that's just another sort of standout track for me. This one's track number 5, it's Eve Part 1, which, as I've just mentioned before, is based upon the BBC TV series called Killing Eve. Some big guitar tones in there, which I'd like. It's almost like a big guitar solo with a haunting sort of chilling side to it, which I thought was very, very good, and that's well worth having a listen to. Track number 8, World Is Falling Apart. The key points for that track for me is as follows. It has a beautiful bridge solo that's nice and melodic, and it's backed off, and then it kicks into a ripping guitar solo. For me, that's the track that gets turned up in the car. In fact, I've rewound it just to play that solo again while I'm sat in congestion, and it's absolutely great. So moving on to track number 7. Now this one's called No One Else But You. Now the vibe I got from this was it was a ballad, and I felt it was a ballad in the style of Peter Green. I quite like Peter Green and the old Fleetwood Mac years, and that reminded me of Peter Green back in the day. It almost had like the Peter Green sort of out of phase pickup tones, which I really liked. Now that is a really good ballad. So track 13 is the second part of the Eve series of this album, so it's called Eve Part 2. And again, it's got a James Bond kind of an arrangement to it. And I've listened to this a good few times now, and I've thought on several occasions, you could actually imagine Shirley Bassey singing this song, particularly when it gets to the big parts in the middle, the big vocals. And I thought that was like, wow, that's brilliant. So what I'm coming to now is I've been to a great gig. The actual performances inspired me to buy this CD from Aynsley himself. It's been signed by him. It's a great album with 13 tracks on it. It's called Along for the Ride. And if you like good music and if you're into like blues sort of inspired craftsmanship, this is definitely worth having a listen to. Around about 7 months ago, I bought a new amplifier, which was the Laney Lionheart 20 watt Class A head, and I bought the 2x12 cab with it as well. And to be honest, I've been using my other Laney rig for my sort of gigs and performances and stuff, which is absolutely fantastic. Listening to Aynsley's album and going to that gig, it's inspired me to basically crack on with that project and basically get myself like a bluesy kind of rig together. So I've ended up buying this. Okay, I'm going to start building up a pedal board. This is a Boss Bluesdriver. Just have a quick look at that. It's the Waza Craft version, and the reason why I've got that is we're going to build a pedal board up for these Class A 20 watt heads. We'll have some kind of uni vibe on there, rotary speaker and all that kind of stuff, all the traditional kind of sort of 60s kind of sort of effects, if you will. And that's going to be the project for the next sort of 12 months. Okay, so Aynsley Lister, the actual gig I went to, I'll give that a 9 out of 10 from Gigs and Guitars, but equally the album's very, very good as well, so I'll give that a 9 out of 10 as well. Suggest you get yourself a copy, you will not be disappointed. And who knows, we might be able to work something out with Aynsley Lister in the future to do perhaps a rig rundown, perhaps an interview. You just never know. And please think about subscribing to the channel if you've liked this video, and give it a like. Your support will really help the channel in blossoming and letting it evolve. And there's always time in the day for a brew. Cracking.